most of them are glorified prop chains and super brittle, and they're unable to deal with edge cases. I think the majority of AI startups will go bust.
Everyone's building with AI, but what if the tools are broken and the companies selling them don't survive? Francis Silva is a hands-on AI and enterprise tech leader. He was a finalist for the Orbi CIO of the Year award and named one of the Peak's emerging leaders in Canada. Today, he's pulling back the curtain on what most AI vendors won't tell you.
I can 100% see that future where different employees have the ability to create small applications or technology that allows them to do their job their way better. Today, humans communicate very much through language. Maybe text isn't the right medium for us to communicate with AI.
Welcome to Espresso and Enterprise. Today we are joined by Francis Silva. He is an AI analytics and technology executive who was recently the EVP of Digital and Artificial Intelligence at Bond Brand Loyalty. Francis, if you can talk a little bit about your background and your experience.
Yeah, for sure. It's great to be here today. As you mentioned, I was the head of AI and digital at Bond. Prior to that, I held a bunch of different roles in the organization, including head of engineering and product, as well as the head of analytics. Prior to Bond, I spent a good chunk of time in retail technology, so with retailers, fuel and drug stores, as well as hard goods.
Okay, so I mean, you have been doing AI projects for a while now. So, what do you think of all the AI hype that you see in the industry right now?
Um, so a lot of the projects today that I'm seeing as I'm talking to you, like clients now who I advise on AI projects, a lot of it is about how do you get ready for AI agents. So as organizations think about the future of their workforce, how do they augment that, but also how do they get their data ready? A lot of organizations are also asking about how do they get the right ROI or how do they measure ROI based on all of these AI investments they've been making in the last 24 months. And I think a lot of them have jumped in and purchased things that may not be providing value today, and now they've got to go realize that value.
Okay, and what is that common theme you have seen where what kind of products you have seen where the purchase price was high but the ROI is not there? Can you give us a couple of examples? Don't need to name any companies. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them have to do with so in the marketing space, like that's my background, customer experience, loyalty, and marketing. And a lot of the products in the marketing space are effectively prompt chains that are very brittle. And so in the marketing space, for example, generating LinkedIn posts or generating copy, generating images and email content, all of those as single tasks make sense. But when they ladder up into a bigger strategy for that business, that's where they break. A lot of those tools ultimately aren't able to generate something that is usable for the users without significant rework.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So with with a lot of details missing with in some of the AI projects, or at least needed to implement a lot of AI projects, what are some of the low-hanging fruits you usually recommend, that IT leaders can get into right away, uh, and get ROI right away?
Yeah, in my past, really one of the biggest places that we saw benefits immediately was in QA. So automating parts of the QA process. You'd be surprised that not only is QA very manual and very people intensive, but also doesn't require a lot of human intervention. And humans sometimes miss things in the QA process where automated workflows using AI systems don't. And so not only did we see improvements in the actual speed of doing QA, but we also saw improvements in the quality of the QA that was performed.
Okay, let's maybe dive into one of the projects you worked on in the past. So can you walk us through what Synapse was and how it came to life?
Yeah, so at Bond, I was responsible for developing our loyalty platform, as you mentioned, Synapse, as well as our customer intelligence
Was
platform, which was Synapse XI. It came to life basically because of this idea that we wanted to take data assets that we knew things about the customers. So, being in loyalty, you obviously have a lot of data about customers, as well as a lot of different models and methodologies and features that you can generate from customers. So, think about predicting things like customer lifetime value, and then creating a holistic view of that customer so that you can provide a next best action to them. Ultimately, that's what intelligence platforms want to do is help you with your next best interaction. And so the way it came about was we had all these ingredients, and a lot of clients were asking for how do you put all these ingredients together? When you think about just holistically intelligence platforms, a lot of them struggled because they were very deterministic. So you had a set of business rules and you said, if this, then this, then this, then do this. Whereas with the advent of generative AI, it can look at all those inputs and then generalize to a specific strategy and then match it to a tactic that you have today. And that's where, at least for me and a lot of the intelligence platforms that I'm working on now, that has been the core thesis and where we're taking intelligence platforms.
Yeah, that seems like a very big realization, right? That with generative AI, things like generalization, instead of fixed rules, you'll have more generalized rules. Um, play a are possible. But before you got there, what were some of the major challenges that you faced that you had to overcome to get there?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of the major challenges that we had to overcome was the foundational tooling. So a lot of foundational tooling, so in the last, especially 24 months ago, was still very nascent. There wasn't great foundational tools, and the foundational models on the marketplace were not stable. And so making sure that we could pick the right capabilities and the right technologies to support us, as well as determining the right architecture that when better technologies or better models showed up, we were able to swap them really quickly. That was a big component. So really the intentional thinking about the architecture. The second, and I think probably the problem for most enterprises today is around education and change management. Because obviously the workflow is now different, the way in which users interact with these systems are different, and the way in which you use the outputs are different. And so educating the workforce on that, as well as the change management as that's part of that, is a big hurdle to overcome.
And when you say users, do you mean both internal and external users, or
Mostly internal, so people who
mostly
are
internal?
actually operating those
Okay.
platforms. So inside the enterprise, they would have potentially gotten an output before and then did their own generalization to match it to a tactic. So for example, in the marketing space, if you knew that this customer was high value and had a propensity for specific types of items, you would say, okay, well, this is the type of offer I want to give them, right? So it could be around pet food or like they have a pet as an example. And so you can be very specific. Now you can be more general. And so you can talk about things like this person is a food explorer, right? They like to explore premium foods that are very different and distinct, as opposed to being very granular and specific about certain business rules.
And was there did results start coming in from the first month, or was there any sort of hesitation from management, right? If did results when the results were not coming in, did you ever question the project?
I think that for a lot of intelligence layers and just prediction layers in general, and even for AI tools today, one of the assumptions we went into is that the underlying foundational models will get better. And I think you have to make that assumption. And so a lot of the challenges that we faced were because the outputs from the models weren't to the level of accuracy that we would want. But as models got better, we would see that accuracy in our outputs. And so as long as we got the workflow right and the process for it, as well as got the feedback loop right, we knew that over time this would get better, as the underlying foundational models got better. And that was a belief and an assumption that we had moving forward. And I think it really helped with making sure to keep everyone aligned and keep investing in that path forward.
And how long did this entire project take from start to finish?
Well, at the time it was still ongoing. So over 2 years, and it went through multiple iterations. But the idea was that the workflow and the business problem we were solving was effectively always the same, which was what is the next best action to give to a customer to build loyalty between them and the brand itself.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I guess with all the hype around AI, do you think there should be, a maximum time a POC or a MVP should take to demonstrate value in this day and age?
That's a good question. I think on timing, if I think about this, right, so normally in technology projects, they talk about timing in sprints, right? So like how many sprints is this going to take, right? We're going to do a 1 month sprint or, 3 sprint cycles, whatever it is. I think for a lot of AI POCs, what we've been discussing right now is around how long until you can feed back into the feedback loop. So for example, you set up a workflow or a proof of concept or some type of MVP, and then you have it run, and then you get some outputs, and then you're able to score those outputs and then run it back through and then see the change. We usually talk about it in cycles of that, only because some projects can be very quick, right? Like you can do a POC now very quickly with human intervention and a large language model. And a lot of the POCs that we're talking about are in the span of weeks because you can already see the output and whether or not the output matches the existing business process you have today. Obviously, as you start to measure that from a um, from a benefits perspective to your business, that's when you're going to need a longer time horizon because some of those benefits, like in the marketing space, for example, loyalty to the brand, takes longer to see. But you can see the change in things like open rates and click through rates immediately.
That makes sense. So, both a combination of short term measurable goals as well as long term value driven business goals.
Yeah, exactly. And the short-term goal, like the short-term metrics is one of the things that we've been talking about a lot as metrics that may not be relevant into the future. So in the marketing space, as an example, when there is so much content out there in the ecosystem, all of a sudden click-through is going to be really hard if everyone's got a ton of content. And so is that what we're still going to try and optimize for? Are we going to optimize for truly or impressions as an example, but or are we going to truly optimize now for a loyalty or engagement or relationship with a brand, which is hard, could be harder to quantify, but also a much longer time horizon.
And as you built this product, you scaled your team from 50 to 250 people. How did you make sure that you were hiring the right people, your systems were ready for the new hires, and yeah, this was ready for scale?
Yeah, a lot of the growth and a lot of the scale that we came was because our loyalty platform was growing and the loyalty business was growing. Part of this was right in the middle of COVID, but also at the beginning of the current AI wave that we see today. And so a lot of the focus was on finding talent within our teams that understood the business and were cross-functional because we knew that we would need to have an AI group that was relatively self-sufficient to do proof of concepts to move very quickly but also knew the business, and that could also then integrate those things back in. And so it was it was basically handpicking certain people. And as I mentioned, the criteria for it were people who were self-starters who understood the business but could also operate cross-functionally. That was more important than pure technical horsepower, only because at the end of the day, you could build a proof of concept and it could work, but if you can't then integrate it back into the workflow and get users to actually use it, um, then it wasn't valuable to the business.
So you said self-starter and cross-functional. Do you see any specific roles in an organization that tends to fit that description better than others?
Yeah, people in product management, so people
Okay.
who understand the business, understand the problem set, but also have a some degree of technical understanding of the solutions out there. A lot of the AI solutions today and a lot of the underlying technology is moving so quickly that Having historic knowledge in it may not be as valuable as, in previous technology revolutions, as well as a lot of the technologies today or a lot of the AI tools, a lot of the learning comes from just being hands-on. And product managers usually understand some of the business problems that can be solved. And so they can be hands-on trying to solve those business problems.
And so when you were implementing this project, did some of the existing roles become redundant, where things you're doing manually, AI could do right now? Did you guys face anything like that?
Yeah, I think obviously that's an outcome of a lot of these projects. I think in large enterprises, really the goal is goal alignment. So how do you align everyone on the goal that you need to be using AI within your business processes and understand how those business processes will evolve? Less about how do you take people and cost out of the business, because then you get other types of ramifications, right? People will underplay the benefits of their specific projects. And so a lot of it had to do with, let's make sure that we can not only get those benefits, i.e., become more efficient in those workflows, but also have the goal alignment where the people whose time was being saved, they were able to work on other valuable work, as opposed to, trying to pull that cost out of different businesses.
So moving forward, do you see any roles, any specific roles, basically going out of market with AI and marketing? Um, like, can you think of any specific roles that come to mind?
Yeah, we're seeing it today, right? With copywriters and even content producers, a lot of people who are generating like very specific deliverables. We're also seeing it with QA, right? So people who are writing test cases as an example, so QA analysts, right? Now you can use tools to write a lot of those test cases. I think that the future of software engineering, as everyone's been talking about, is changing. I think the future of software in general is changing. So I think that those are areas that we want to keep an eye on, but very specifically in the marketing space, copywriters, content producers. I think right now, there's some tools that have emerged in the marketplace that do design quite well. They're not perfect yet, but I think that designers, so especially junior designers, will struggle, as well as junior business analysts. So a lot of the analysis that you would do from a strategy perspective can be done with tools in the marketplace, with Anthropic, with ChatGPT, with Grok quite easily. And then truly the higher level strategic work is where we're seeing a lot of the value today still.
So, what percent of AI spend right now in the market is POCs and MVPs versus real production deployments?
So I was talking to a head of technology for a consulting organization just the other day, and we were talking about how do they actually allocate their budgets or their capital to those different buckets, specifically commercial opportunities, SG&A, like internal savings, and then COGS savings opportunities. A lot of it now is being focused in on COGS. So like how do you deliver your products and services more efficiently? That's where the internal capital is going. A lot of the POCs, though, of software in the marketplace is in the shared services, that SG&A bucket. So things like HR, finance, legal, right? All of the back end services. That's where a lot of the SaaS POCs are happening. But a lot of the capital and a lot of the work that big enterprises are doing is in that COGS bucket. A lot of those projects are unable to scale for a variety of reasons. I think the fundamental reason is that they are picking tools in the marketplace that today are really good, but tomorrow the frontier model companies like ChatGPT, or sorry, OpenAI or Anthropic or others basically take the best features of some of those tools and then implement it directly into their tools. And so all of a sudden, you implemented a tool or you implemented a new workflow with a tool that you now don't even need to pay for because, you know, ChatGPT can do it natively out of the box.
So how do you make that decision? The only way to avoid that is build on your own and get off it if there's a new model, right? Because if you're locked in with a vendor for say 3 years, what are you going to do when ChatGPT or OpenAI can solve the same problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the conversation now is about defining the AI native workflow. So what would an AI native workflow look like if, the AI models that underpin it could do what we actually wanted it to do? So if you think about it from that perspective, and then you layer in the idea of how do we sustain our competitive advantage, either through data moats, vertical expertise, or complex task orchestration. So you layer those in, and then that's how you define your workflow. And so the underlying model or the underlying technology that you use, you can, switch out at a later date when there's a better version of it, as opposed to, putting all of your workflow into that model itself or into that specific piece of software.
And what about vendors who build their own proprietary models, right? And they say, like, we help you build these workflows faster because of our proprietary model. And like, you're like, okay, OpenAI can't do it. Let me buy it. But in 3 months, that changes. How do you account for that?
That's a place where I think if you take it at a macro level, anybody competing and I have a better model, um, in order for them to continue to compete in that space, they will need to be spending a lot more R&D, and it'll just keep accelerating. And so unless they are well funded like OpenAI or Anthropic, or one of the hyperscalers like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, um, it'll be very hard for them to continue to have the advantage there unless they have a proprietary data asset. So if a lot of these companies, if a lot of them are just, hey, listen, we have a better model because we have a workflow, it's challenging for them to compete into the future. But if they have a proprietary data asset that none of the other um, frontier model builders or hyperscalers have, then I could see them continuing to have a competitive advantage that you would be willing to pay for. I think the gap will shrink over time, but I think it will still be there.
And what does this data look like that gives you, what does this proprietary data looks like that gives you an advantage?
Usually it's ground truths. And so I talk about it in terms of, for example, if you were in the logistics business and you had transponders in trucks, and those transponders were relaying data about the where the location of those trucks were and their speed and how long it took them to get from point A to point B, you could use that to train your models, let's say for transportation optimization. And fundamentally, your models would be better than someone who didn't have those ground truths, who didn't have the data about where these trucks actually went and their actual speed if to build out your models. So that's the type of, when I talk about data assets, that's what I'm talking about, is someone who has a ground truth. In the marketing space, it would be what users actually purchased or what offers they actually used, things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, when an executive is, comparing three products and one of them is by a startup, right? And startups don't have the advantage, the data advantage for sure, right? Because the big companies have all the data or they buy out companies that have the data. So how should an executive look at a startup? Uh, like some of the things you mentioned was okay, funding, how much funding they have. Beyond that, what else should they look at if they're buying a startup's product?
I think ultimately you're thinking about your problem and the team that you have within your organization to interface with that startup. I think what startups bring is they bring agility to your business, and they also bring new thinking, as well as a set of probably pretty talented and hungry people who are trying to use these tools to solve your problem. And so I think that there's that. I think especially for enterprises that have proprietary data or that have their own data asset but don't know how to unlock it, a lot of these startups can help them do that as well.
Makes sense. So startups, instead of having their own proprietary data, working with the enterprise's data and unlocking value from it.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, if you have that data asset, you could either sell it to someone else who can unlock value from it, or you can unlock value from it yourself and capture all of that incremental value from refining that data asset and leveraging it in your business.
So, how do you personally use AI every single day? I'm very curious.
That's a great question. So I've got a couple different apps that I use. So for example, I'm a big triathlete. I race Ironman, and a lot of my training, there's a lot of volume in my training, right? So swimming, biking, and running, and I play pickleball and do a bunch of other things. And so I've got an app that I built on Lovable that connects to my Strava that allows me to see my overall volume for the week, but also helps me then rebalance what I'm going to do for the rest of this week, as well as suggest what I can do for the subsequent weeks to ensure that I don't get injured or don't get burnt out. That's one. A second lovable app that I have is around going to the racetrack. So me and a few friends, we like to go to the racetrack, and we're driving cars out there, and all the cars collect all this telemetry, so data about the speed and the GPS location and the G forces that you pull. We're able to load that into a Supabase table and then visualize it through Lovable to see where we are faster than each other. So it looks exactly like you would see on a Formula One race, where we can see in different sectors who's faster than who, but also what we can do to be faster in those areas, which I think is like it's super exciting to be able to build like small applications like that yourself and unlock insights from your own data.
That's very interesting. And you have built it for your own personal use cases, but do you see the same behavior in enterprise in a couple of years where every single individual is building an app for themselves every week or something like that?
I can 100% see that future. I think a future where different employees have the ability to create small applications or technology that allows them to do their job their way better is definitely a possibility, or for them to actually leverage the way they think, but also their expertise, right? Because everyone's got different ways of working, different types of expertise. And so if you can build technology to augment those people and you could do it yourself, I think that would unlock tons of human productivity, and also allow people to probably get more time back in their lives.
And what do you think is the path between now and that future where every employee has their own co-pilot which they use on a daily basis?
I think there's probably a level of input change. So Apple's talking about this, Meta has been talking about this, which is maybe text isn't the right medium for us to communicate with AI. Today, humans communicate very much through language, right? Through spoken language. Maybe that's the way we communicate through them. I mean, there's other like Neuralink, there's other types of companies out there that are trying to connect with technology through your brain. So I think that the way in which we connect with technology, because text can be quite clunky, there's certain things about spoken word, like your inflection and like your tone, that really matter, as well as even your facial expressions. So I think that that's a big hurdle that we still need to solve. And I think the second one, and probably the biggest one, is change management, helping people understand how to use these tools in that way and be comfortable using these tools in that way.
Okay, great. Francis, this was great. I have three questions left for you, but they're rapid fire questions. So you can take more than let's give it 10 seconds per question.
Got it. Yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Number one. What's the number one red flag you have seen in an AI pitch in the past couple of years?
Number one red flag: when someone says, I just need access to your data, if they don't have a clear problem to solve, and how they don't know how they create value for you, and they just want to vaguely see your data, that's when I get a bit, that's when my spidey senses go up.
What is the most overrated AI trend right now?
Most overrated AI trend is agents that pretend to be fully autonomous. right? A lot of companies talk about their AI agents replacing employees, but most of them are, glorified prompt chains and super brittle, and they're unable to deal with edge cases. I think that that's a place where right now it's pretty overrated.
Okay. So if you were to pick one, 90% of current a billion plus valuation AI startups are going to bust or 10x their valuation. Which one would you pick?
If 90% of them would, I
90%, the
think 90%
majority.
of I think the majority of AI startups will go bust. I think it's because a lot of them are wrappers around foundational models that will any of the good features these companies, these startups build, the frontier model companies will take them and put them into their foundational models.
And give us one company that will be valued at over $100 billion in 5 years.
Over $100 billion in 5 years. That's hard. I have to think about it.
It's rapid fire.
There's there's a company that I saw at Vancouver Startup Week. It's called Chunks Chunks Chunks.
Okay.
They do something really cool, which is they look at the videos that you have in your in a folder or that videos that you have, and then you're able to prompt the AI on what types of editing you want, and then it's able to
Okay.
find those video clips and then edit
Yeah.
them together for you in a reel. That's pretty cool.
You know what? That would be very helpful for this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. This was great, Francis. Thanks a lot for your time. It was super helpful. And I'm sure our listeners will find a lot of value out of it. Uh, Thanks for your time.